Welcome, everybody. We're going to be working on the Unit 2 assignment tonight. We're also going to cover some basic aspects of working with Jupyter Notebook files, or what we call ipython notebooks technically, because I know some people are struggling with that. Before we started the recording, I did recommend to people that if Jupyter Notebook is clunky for you, you can go back to using Spider. I haven't done a lot of coding with the Python notebooks in Spider to give you my experience on it, but I was toying today with Visual Studio Code and found it really promising in that regard. And I like kind of like the workflow of it a little bit, and the fact that I could incorporate uh, an AI coding assistant right inside the environment was very helpful as well. So I might start pushing people to go that route. We'll see. Jupyter Notebook is still considered the preeminent tool for doing this stuff. So let's stick with the tool. Um, basically, I'm going to go through all the tasks here. This does require the use of a CSV file, which is attached to this assignment, so you can download this. And there's a starter version of the notebook available here, so you should download both of those files. I have those files already resident, and not in that folder, but remember I created a Jupyter folder in my documents folder because Jupyter Notebook, one of its quirks is when you launch it, it puts you in your user account. I can get to my documents folder easily, but I can't get to my Google Drive from here. I can get to my OneDrive, not my Google Drive, whatever, right? So my, little favoritism towards Microsoft there. But since I created the folder in here, I created a folder for machine learning, and then I put all my files here. When you get to your files, so I have, the starter version, which is just called assignment week 2, and then I have a solved version, which is already open on my screen here. Because that particular file is open, notice that the icon is green. That means it's up in a tab and running, and there's a kernel attached to it, right? Now, I created a solution to this, right? So we have like one little challenge in there, or actually a few tasks to complete. And right now, I'm just looking at my solution on the other screen here to make sure I'm just all poised and ready to go. And then we will start with the starter version. So I have the starter version of the homework and the data file that we're going to use in the same folder. Now, this is a concern. So, and I mentioned this in the assignment description, that if you do not put the data file in the same folder as your code file, then you have to invoke operating system commands inside of Python to be able to get to the file correctly. And I'm going to just tell you, it's not really worth the hassle, right? Just take that CSV file, put it in the same folder with the notebook, wherever that happens to be, and then you can call it in directly. There's no reason to trouble yourself. Okay, so the pathway to doing that, by the way, is you import usually the OS library for Python, and then it brings up the file manager, and then you can actually navigate and find your data file, like you would a regular program. It is not worth the hassle to do that. We just need a simple read of the file, right? If we were building an application to read any file, yeah, I would totally do that. If I'm just loading up one file, not worth the effort. And I'm looking at like Paul, you're right, it is a complete pain to do it the other way. I did look at homework already for those of you that submitted, and some of you chose to do it that way, and that's fine, because maybe the tools or the references that you looked at guided you that way, and that's fine. There's no judgment on that. All right, so given that this file and this file are in the same folder, I'm going to go ahead and load up that notebook in a tab. And you see it's opening up in a separate browser tab. And the way that we're going to do this is we're basically going to read through the notebook file. The notebook file, unlike a regular Python file, is a combination of cells that can just contain text, or what we call really markdown in this format. It's kind of like HTML, but not really. So it's just words on the page. Then we'll have cells like this one, like this is cell number 1 that has code, and you can see there's line numbers for the code and everything. And then when you're in a cell like this and you see how I clicked on it to activate it, that cell can now be run. So if there was code in this window, I could run it. Now, this is really basic. There's no information here. There's no starter code. You guys notice that? All right. And that's maybe a little daunting for some of you, because if you're like a normal person, you take the Python class. Oh yeah, we did a chapter on reading in files. Oh my God, I forgot it all. It was a year ago, right? That's pretty normal. Or maybe worst case scenario, I I learned Python, but they never taught me how to load a file, and that happens too, right? Uh, First of all, I'm going to tell you what, it's not a big deal to load a file. Um, the bigger deal is processing the file as you're working with it. All right. So I have this loaded up, and I want you to notice that they have created for us in advance 3 places to write code that match up with the 3 tasks, or is it 2 tasks that we have, basically. All right. So first things first. All right. Let's say we're interested in the weather and in the data from Open Government Data, right? So there's a website where you can download this stuff. We have obtained a file called whatever, and this has weather data in it. Okay. The file is in the format of a CSV. A CSV file is what we've talked about before. It's tabular data, but the tabular data is all separated by commas. And this is a very common way to store data, export data, move data around, and more importantly, feed it into applications. Very common format. What I recommend, right, would be to look at the data file. Whenever you're working with data files, same thing, same advice I gave to my database class. You're looking at a database, open up the tables and see what's in it. Yeah. And so can we start by doing that? So I have that CSV file, not in the unit 3, but in the unit 2 folder, is sitting right there. And you can see in my Windows file system, this is attributed to Excel. So I can open this up in Excel. However, right, and I'm just going to point this out, I can open it up with a text editor also. So for example, I could open up Notepad++. Here's my Notepad++ from my database class. And I can just drag it into a generic text editor and I can see the data. And you can see it's not pretty, doesn't make a lot of sense in this format, whatever. I can also give it a double click and let it open in Excel. I'm just going to do it just once for right now on purpose. And of course, Excel goes over here. So I'm going to pull it back over. All right, so here it is in Excel. It looks a little cleaner because it does fall into rows and columns. And notice that the first row is just the column headers, right? And then each row is data for a particular date. So they have mean, temperature, max, min, blah, 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 all this data. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. Right? Lots and lots of data. Right? But that gives us the general layout of the information. And I think that's a really important step. If you're going to analyze data, look at your data. And that sounds counterintuitive that people wouldn't even think about doing that. But a lot of times people don't think about doing that. You're processing information, look at the information in its raw form and see what you're contending with. Are these the raw ingredients that you need? Does it have what you need to do your work? That's, is it well structured? And if you remember from like the data analytics class, and I'm hoping all of you have had that one, data analytics 1 at least, a lot of times when you get data, sometimes you have to clean it or fix it or delete stuff, or there's blank entries or whatever. And those types of things can break computer programs when the data is inconsistent. So it's important to look at your data files for those reasons. All right. Next thing that I will mention is, when I was playing with Visual Studio Code earlier, I was looking, I can look at the same data set here, and I loaded up the CSV file inside of Visual Studio Code, and it, as Visual Studio Code often does, it threw up a little box for me and said, oh, hey, do you want to install our recommended CSV tool? I'm like, okay, why not? And it's called Rainbow CSV. And what it does, you can see what it does, is it highlights everything and colorizes it. So when I'm looking at a column header that says mean temperature, it's blue. Oh, it's the blue one. See what I mean? So I think that's kind of cool, right? And then the sidebar here, it shows you how big the data is. It's huge. Yeah. Right. But that's kind of neat, right? So you can look at it in the text editor, the coding engine. You can look at it in a spreadsheet tool. And yes, you could put it on Google Sheets if you want to. It doesn't matter. You can look at the raw data. All right. Back over to the instructions. And let me see if I can even find the instructions, right? So many tabs. All right. And I want to do it from here, right? So it says task one is to create a variable. Okay, load it into a data frame in Python. So you take that, we'll load it into a data frame. And I apologize because I'm in like edit mode here. All right. I apologize for all the bouncing around. There we go. I wanted that little tool. Load it into a data frame. So some of you are probably Googling what that means, right? It's just a data frame basically means you're sorting it in a structure that's list like, right? And you're conglomerating the data together. Make sure you have that file in the same folder, right? If you're using this product, and let me just put this out here. Did anybody use Google Colab to do this work or try it? Yeah, I haven't had a lot of time to experiment. Um, I plan on making it an endeavor in the near future to experiment with that product because if you can do this stuff online without loading anything, I think that's kind of promising, so we'll see. But I found it very clunky, honestly. Yeah, without the CSV file in the right place, it won't work. We talked about all that. All right, so we're going to create a variable to store a data frame, and then we're going to print the first 5 rows to get an understanding of the data. Then we're going to display more data, and this really should be 2 tasks. We'll do that one next, and then we'll visualize it. We'll create a graphic out of it. Now that particular part of it is really open to interpretation. What I noticed with a few people that completed the homework, and the ones that tend to do it early tend to be the overachievers, by the way, is that some people weren't happy doing one visualization and did like 5 or 6. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You figured out how to do all those. You know what? We played with all of those in our data analytics class. So, I mean, yeah, okay. You can use those examples. I think some visualizations are more appropriate than others. Which ones you choose are very, very subjective. It depends on what message you're trying to deliver with the data visually, right? And so that becomes an aspect of it as well. All right, so that's the basic lay of the land. So I'm going to go back over here now, and I'm going to start putting the code together. And if we're going to be working with a data frame, okay, the first thing that I'm going to throw out there is one of the libraries that we talked about in the earlier weeks that's really kind of built for doing this stuff. Does anybody remember which library it is? Let me answer it for you. It's pandas, right? And so you see in my first coding cell here, and you know what? I don't really need to put that there. Let's put it at the bottom here. All right. So we're going to need to use this library because this is the one that helps us put our data in structures that's really easy to manipulate, right? And this is one of the more powerful libraries in Python when working with data, as is a convention in Python, not a rule, convention. A lot of people, when they're using pandas command in their code, will alias it as PD to make it easier to type it out, right? So I'm going to follow that convention. The other thing that might happen, if you are using the Anaconda distro, you should already have this library. But if we run this first cell and it doesn't work, then we're going to have to do what we call a pip command to install the right libraries. One little side note, when I was working in Visual Studio Code and I was writing the code, because I was working in a virtual Python environment, not the actual one on my computer, I had to install all the libraries at every step so that was really cumbersome. But I could do it from right inside the product which was helpful. Okay. Same is true, I think, here with the Jupyter Notebook, and I guess we'll find out the hard way. So in principle, I can just put this command in and hit the run button, and nothing happened. I'm okay. If you got an error message with that, that means it's not installed, and then we'll show you how to install it. And for anybody in that situation, please hold that question. And when we do break, I'll handle those. Okay. All right. Next thing we need to do. And actually, I'm going to move this again. All right, I'm being very indecisive. I'm going to put this here. So there's our import. And I'm just going to say here, let's start by importing tools library. Okay, so we're going to import pandas. We already tested it. It's okay. All right. Next, it says create a variable we will call the data frame from the stored location. Okay, so I'm going to be simple here. I'm just going to say df for data frame. Is that all right? I want to say something more verbose? Go for it. And then we're going to feed the data frame by using pandas, right, which works well with tabular data. And we're going to issue the read underscore CSV function, right? And that's, now I would not expect you guys to know this off the top of your head. This is like an instructed thing, that it has a tool built in that can read CSV files. And if it can read CSV files, you're probably guessing already, can it read JSON files? Can it read Excel files? Can it read? And the answer is yes, yes, yes to all of those, right? We're given a CSV, so that's what we're reading. Now we just put in the name of the file. Now you could grab that right from your file system. So that might be the smartest way to do it, honestly. So if the file is here's a smart way to not mistype a file name, by the way, is right click, rename, Control A to select all, assuming you see your file extensions, copy that. So I did a Control C or right click copy. And then I'm going to paste that here inside of quotes. You can single quotes, double quotes, doesn't matter. Just be consistent. So that will read in the CSV file, the whole thing, and store it in this variable. And from here on in, whenever I want to deal with that file, it's all in that variable. Pretty cool. And really, if you think about it, very powerful, simple little command. That's why people use pandas, right? If I did the traditional approach we learned in the Python class, we would do like, we'd read each line, put it in a loop, all that stuff. Pandas does that automatically. Done. One statement. Right? See what I mean by the higher level approach here? Right? And we're using pandas. It's an API, right? So we're leveraging tools that somebody else already built. Okay. And Laura, I do see your comment there. So, all right. Then we're asked to print the first 5 rows of the data frame. And you know what? There's a command that's built into pandas that does this too. So one thing you can do is you can just say print df, and that'll print the whole file. That would work right here in this environment. However, cumbersome. They have a special command for data frames. And this is part of the pandas library. So mind you, we're using a pandas command to read a CSV file, and the output of that is getting stored here. So when I refer to df again, any of the commands that I want to run from the pandas library can be appended to this, because this is a pandas structure, a data frame. So the command to look at the first 5 lines is just called head with parentheses. That reads the first 5 lines. I don't have to specify the amount of lines. It automatically reads the first 5 lines. And you guys, that's task 1. That's complete. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm in the tab right now, or in the cell, I should say, right? I'm not up here, not down here. I'm in this one. And now I'm going to hit the run button, and it should bring back the first 5 lines. Notice the index numbers 0 through 4, different than MySQL. I was getting that question in the previous class. Do database tables start indexing at 1 or 0? Database tables start at 1 because 0 is reserved for the header row, by the way. But what it did, and I don't know if you guys are picking up on this, but there's too many columns to go all the way across the screen. So it's doing the continuation command. That's a continuation command, the slash. And it's showing you the first 5 columns. It had to do it over 4 segments, though. But this is what the data looks like. Another task that we're asked to do is to ramp this up, right? And display more data. Okay. A few different approaches we can use on this, by the way, when we're using pandas. So we're going to do that down here in this little cell. Is we can expand it from the first 5 rows to the first whatever number of rows. So if I want to look at the first 10 rows of data, right, I just put in the number 10. I'm in this cell. I can just hit run, and there it is, right? We want to make that 20, change the number. There's also, by the way, there's also a tail command, which prints the last 5. And there's another command, and it's not really urgent that we learn it right now, where I can put in the starting row number and the ending row number and just print those rows. So and I'm just going to type this up as an example. So I could have, for example, a tail command shows me the last 10 rows, or I could type a command that shows me specific rows. So I could go from row, I don't know, 11 through 22. And it just shows me that chunk of data. Okay, let's answer the question though. Why? Right? Well, sometimes when your data set is ridiculously large and I want to see what it looks like, I don't want to see all 50,000 rows. 5 is good. I just want to see what if it's working, right? And that's why we use the head and the tail command to see if it's working or specific rows. So if you want, you can try these extra commands. I'm just going to comment them out, by the way. Like so. Now, I'm being really silly here because this is auto saving. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do a relative save here, and this is not working the way I do not like this interface a lot. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make a copy. I don't want to destroy my original work, so I'm gonna switch over to this copy right now. And the reason is I'm gonna go back and remove the solution. So next time I do this, I don't have to do them again. You guys feel my drift here? Right. So I can always go back. All right. So there's the first 2 tasks. Now the third little aspect here is we can also do summary statistics. So in other words, we can describe our data as well, and I'll put a little space in between there. So I think this is a particularly useful command. So we're asking pandas to describe the data frame, like what are we dealing with? So let's run that command. Now what did I put in wrong here? All right. This is great when you see me. Oh, okay. This is pretty interesting what just happened to me. So if this happens to you, I want to explain. First of all, don't panic, right? Because it was just working, right? Right. But here's what we were doing. We're in a Python notebook file, and I haven't done these commands yet. On this, I did them back here, but I didn't do them over here. So here's what I have to do first is I have to run each cell one at a time, the ones I already ran. Now this one will run because the problem was this wasn't defined because it was defined up here. See the difference? Right? That's the Y there. All right, so here's the output again, 10 entries. And then notice the describe. What the describe does, it goes column by column and shows me the count, the mean, the standard deviation, the min, the max, and the quartile points for all the data. This is really useful stuff. So, like, to put this in the context of statistics, this is giving you statistical information with the describe command very quickly. So if you're trying to do an analysis, um, you can look at this information to go, oh, the mean temperature is, you know, the max pressure is, the dew point, 75th quartile is, et cetera. Right. And these are outputs of the describe command. Now, finally, we're asked to do some visualization. And to do the visualization, we are going to need to bring in some visualization tools. And this is something you can research, but one of the libraries that we taught in the data analytics class, and really one of the more popular ones for doing this type of thing, is the matplot library. We talked about it during our lecture. And in particular, we're using pyplot. And then I'm going to alias this in my code using this 3-letter prefix. So in other words, instead of typing all this to get a command going, I'm just going to type those 3 letters. They'll be the equivalent, right? So let's make sure that this is going to run, that the library is there. So I'm just going to hit run right now. No errors. So I'm okay. The library is present. All right. So next, let's start thinking about how we're going to plot this. Now, this is where I'm hoping that either you look back at your data analytics homework and saw some of the stuff we did there and try to maybe build from there, or you did a little bit of research and asked, or if you're really clever and used an AI engine, you could give it the data file and say, hey, make a visualization of this, please. Right. And that's basically the approach that I did. Just to give you guys a heads up, I tried a few different approaches, but I figured that some people would ask it in the form of a question to an AI. So I did the same thing. I forget exactly how I worded it, and I did it inside of Visual Studio Code with Copilot, by the way. And I just said, I was on the CSV file, and I said, can you please create a Python visualization of this data? And this is the code that it gave me. So, all right, let's start with this. Okay, so first we're going to plot the first 2 numeric columns if available, right? And so this command here does a little command, right? So remember, df is our data frame, so it's in pandas mode. So select data types is a pandas command, and we're only looking for columns that have numbers in them. I don't want descriptions, I just want numbers, right? And then we're trying to find that amongst the columns. So we're not looking in the rows, we're looking in the columns and finding all of those. All right, so if it returns a result where the number of columns is at least 2, then so here's the thinking. If I have 2 data points, I can visualize it. If I have less than 2 data points, it's not really easy to create a visualization because there's no X and Y basically to put it on a graph. And so I wrote, or excuse me, the AI wrote an if statement to test that. So it said if the length of the numeric columns is greater than or equal to 2. So I have at least 2 numeric columns, then we'll do the code. So this is the plotting code here that I'm about to paste in. So I'm just going to copy paste this. The first one did not indent. Remember, these indents have to be consistent, right? And so we're going to plot X and Y. Where I'm doing a scatter plot. You could choose a different one. We have an X label, a Y label. We have a title. And then we use the show command. So any of you that did this in the data analytics class with me should be kind of familiar. I mean, I'm not expecting you guys to be experts on this stuff. And here's the reality. You probably never will be, right? Once again, we're working at a high level with this stuff, and we're utilizing tools that somebody else built to help us write our code. I am putting an else in the statement because what if the data file that we feed in doesn't have enough data to post any visualization. So I'm going to just create an error message. That's all I'm doing. I could, real frankly, have skipped this and this and this, and I could have just done that, just done this and the import. And this is kind of like a safety mechanism, the if statement. But given the fact that I manually looked at my data, I already knew there were more than 2 numeric columns. I really didn't need to run that code. See the logic? So the code that the AI generated for me, in essence, is a little too complex when I know the data is okay. So, all right. So I'm in the cell now. I'm going to hit the run button, and here's my visualization. And I'm looking at 2 pieces of information: mean temperature versus max temperature, right? And when you plot that out, this is what it looks like as a scatter plot. I saw people do bar charts, line graphs, multiple line graphs. I'm trying to think of like the other visualizations I saw today. So this is not the only kind that you have to do. If you would rather do a bar chart, try that. Right, that's okay. But if you do exactly what I did here, I'm totally fine with it. Right. All right. Now that the work is done, right, make sure that you save your work, right, and then submit it as indicated. What I would recommend, right, is that you do a screenshot document, show me everything in a screenshot document, and that you also share this file with me, right? So you can upload that file as well. If you want to zip the file, that's fine. It's only one file. And this is one of the advantages, by the way, of working with a Python notebook, is I can combine a lot of different code snippets into one file and run each piece separately. But as we've discovered, all the stuff in the one notebook is interrelated. The variables are interrelated. The imports are interrelated. All right, so let's call that a solution. And this video will end here.